Hello, nice to see you on my channel, Hearts and Shadows. Enjoy watching.
My name is Patrick. I walked away from my marriage while my wife was sleeping, leaving no note or anything. I know that sounds cold, but believe me, I didn't come to that decision overnight. It took years of holding on, trying, hoping things would get better. But they didn't. The truth is, my marriage became a place I no longer recognized. We had history, love, memories, but over time, all of that got buried under arguments and tension. And eventually, I stopped, then physically disappeared. What I didn't expect was what happened years later. Let me tell you how we started. For a long time, I thought I had everything figured out. From the moment we met, Angelina and I just clicked. We weren't perfect, but we were deeply in love. So when we decided to get married, I didn't hesitate. I believed in us. But marriage has a way of testing everything you think you know. After we got married, something happened that neither of us was prepared for. Angelina got pregnant. It was one of the happiest moments of our lives, but everything came crashing down. One afternoon, while I was at work, I got a call that shattered my world. Angelina had suffered a miscarriage. It wasn't just a pregnancy loss. It nearly killed her. She lost a lot of blood and had to be rushed to the emergency room when a friend came around and saw her passed out on the kitchen floor. According to her, she couldn't find her phone to call anyone. When she got home from the hospital, she was different. Quieter, colder. She didn't yell or accuse me, but something in her eyes had changed. It was like a part of her shut down, and I couldn't reach it no matter how hard I tried. She started acting like everything I did irritated her. I would say something simple like, "Do you want your coffee?" and she'd snap. I chalked it up to grief and tried to be patient. I understood that losing a child who should be our child was more than anyone should have to bear. I figured she just needed time. But time didn't heal her. If anything, things got worse. She stopped smiling and started picking fights over the smallest things. If I came home 5 minutes late, she'd accuse me of not caring. If I forgot to do the dishes, it became a lecture about how I never helped her. Her words got sharper, and they cut deeper with every argument. It didn't matter what I said or did. It always felt like I was walking on eggshells. I kept trying to talk to her, trying to understand what was going on in her mind, but she would shut me down before the conversation even started. I held on for as long as I could. I reminded myself that I loved her, that she was grieving, that this was just a phase. But love has its limits, and patience can only stretch so far. Eventually, I started snapping back. I didn't want to, but I couldn't keep swallowing everything without saying a word. The moment I started matching her energy, raising my voice, defending myself, the whole house turned into a war zone. The silence between us grew louder. Fights would last for days. We'd sleep on opposite sides of the bed without speaking, and I began to wonder, does she even want me here anymore? It was painful to admit, but I started feeling like a stranger in my own home. The woman I loved with all my heart had become someone I couldn't recognize. And no matter how many times I asked myself what went wrong, I kept coming back to the same moment, when we lost our baby. That was the crack that broke everything wide open. I don't think she meant to hurt me. I think she was just drowning in pain and didn't know how else to breathe. But knowing that didn't stop me from drowning, too. There was a point in my marriage when things got so bad, I genuinely started to wonder if my wife, Angelina, was seeing someone else. I didn't want to believe it, but the things she does didn't feel like frustration anymore. It felt like distance. Like her heart had left the marriage and was somewhere else. That thought alone was enough to mess with my head. So I started checking her phone when she was asleep or in the shower. I went through her messages, social media, even call logs, looking for anything out of place. When that didn't show anything, I started watching her patterns. I'd ask her where she was going and then quietly follow her a few times. I even installed a tracker on her car once. But the truth is, I found nothing. Not a single sign that she was cheating. She was just angry, and I was her outlet. You would think that knowing she wasn't having an affair would have brought me relief, but it didn't. I brought up the idea of couples therapy one night after another long argument. I told her maybe we needed help, someone neutral who could help us work through the mess. But the second I mentioned therapy, she snapped. She dismissed it like it was ridiculous. Like I was weak for even thinking we needed help. There was no discussion as she went right back to scrolling through her phone. I was the only one trying. She wasn't interested in fixing anything. After that, I realized I was tired. I started staying out longer. I'd hang around with friends just to avoid going home. I wasn't even really enjoying their company. I just didn't want to walk through that front door and feel that heaviness anymore. And yeah, I started drinking more than usual. Because at least when I was tipsy, the constant feeling of failure didn't hit as hard. But no matter how late I got home or how much I had to drink, Angelina always had something to say. It didn't matter if I was quiet or polite. She would find something to criticize. She would follow me into the room, talking and nagging and throwing jabs until I eventually fell asleep. And by the time morning came, it was like a cycle starting all over again. I wasn't living. I was surviving, existing in a home that no longer felt like mine, with a woman who, somehow, still wore the face of the person I once loved. The breaking point came quietly. I had just lost my job during a layoff, but the timing couldn't have been worse. I was already hanging by a thread emotionally, and that thread finally snapped. With no job to go to, I started spending more time at home. And that's when things got worse. Angelina, my wife, didn't even try to hide her disappointment anymore. Every morning started with a complaint, and every night ended in a fight. She would throw little jabs at me like I was some failure taking up space. A man without a job has no say, she once told me while walking away, and that one stung more than I care to admit. I didn't feel like a man anymore. I felt like a shell. The woman I once loved looked at me like I was the reason her life was miserable. I tried to talk to her, to make her see I was trying, that I was applying to jobs, that this wasn't the life I planned either. But she didn't care. Every day felt like I was walking barefoot on broken glass. Then one morning, something in me just gave out. She was still asleep in bed, wrapped up in a blanket. I quietly got up, grabbed a small bag, and packed only the essentials, clothes, a laptop, my ID, and a few important documents. I wondered if I should leave a note or something. But I knew if I stopped to think too long, I'd never leave. So I didn't. I headed straight to the bank and withdrew every last dime I had. It wasn't much, but it was all I could depend on now. Then I walked into a mobile store, bought a brand new phone. I logged out of everything, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and deleted it all. And then I broke my old phone into pieces. I didn't want anyone to find me. Not friends. Not family. Not even her. After that, I went online and found a small Airbnb cabin tucked deep in the woods. It was cheap and remote, exactly what I was looking for. I booked it immediately and headed out of the city that same day. And that was it. That's how I walked out of my life. That first night, when I lay down and heard only the sound of wind through trees and the distant hoot of an owl, I felt peace I hadn't felt in years. In that cabin, I started to rebuild from scratch. With my laptop and no distractions, I began to focus on skills I'd ignored for a long time. I created profiles on Fiverr and Upwork, offering writing, editing, and some basic graphic design. It wasn't much, but slowly the jobs started coming in. I was making just enough to cover food, rent, and a few other basics. It wasn't luxury, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. After a few months, I made a decision that even surprised me. I bought a small piece of land not too far from where I'd been staying. It was cheap, quiet, deep in the woods, and more importantly, it was mine. I didn't need much, so I got a local guy to help me build a small cottage. Just one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a porch where I could sit and listen to the world do its thing. It was simple, but it worked. I completely cut ties with the life I used to know. I avoided anything that reminded me of Angelina. But sometimes, when the nights got really quiet, my mind would drift back to her. I'd wonder if she had moved on. Maybe she found someone else who made her laugh, or held her the way I used to. Or maybe she was just happy I was gone. Those thoughts didn't haunt me, but they visited often enough. Then, over a year later, something shifted inside me. Maybe it was the calm I'd finally found, or maybe I was just curious. But one afternoon, I picked up the phone and called my family. The moment they heard my voice, I could tell they were stunned. My mom cried, my sister kept asking if I was okay, and my younger brother just kept saying, "Man, where the hell have you been?" They were relieved. They thought I was dead, honestly. Said they had no idea what happened to me. But in the middle of all that catching up, they told me Angelina had been looking for me. Not just once or twice, but constantly. She never gave up, they said. She called everyone, tried old friends, and even contacted extended relatives. She hired people to help her look. She was asking questions no one could answer. I didn't know how to feel about that. I told them I was safe and fine, and we talked a little longer before saying goodbye. That call didn't change my life right away, but it planted a seed I didn't realize would grow into something bigger in the days to come. It had been a few weeks since I reached out to my family just to let them know I was still alive. But one quiet morning, deep in the stillness of the woods, I heard a knock at my cottage door. That sound alone was strange enough to put me on edge. Out here, nobody just shows up. I approached the door. When I opened it, there she was, Angelina, my wife, standing there. Her clothes were travel-wrinkled. She didn't say a word at first, just looked at me like she was afraid I'd shut the door in her face. She told me later that once my cousin let it slip that I had called, she didn't hesitate. She used every last bit of money she had saved to hire a private investigator to find me. And honestly, I didn't think she'd ever go that far, but she did. She looked tired, not just physically. She told me she didn't know where else to go. She hadn't come to fight. She just wanted a chance to talk. So I stepped aside and let her in. We sat in silence for a while. Then she started with an apology. She said she was sorry. Over and over. She admitted that after the miscarriage, something in her broke. That even though she never said it, she had started blaming me for not being there when it happened, even though I was at work. She said she didn't realize how deeply she was pushing me away until I was already gone. She said she dumped all her pain on me because I was the only one close enough to carry it, and it wasn't fair. It was easier to be angry at me than to face what she had lost. She told me she finally went to therapy after months of spiraling. Said it took talking to someone else to realize she had buried all that resentment, let it fester, and then used it as fuel against me. She cried as she said she regretted shutting me out, rejecting every attempt I made to fix things, brushing off therapy, and turning our home into a battlefield. When she finally paused to breathe, I told her the truth. That I didn't leave because I stopped loving her. I left because I was starting to forget who I was. The constant criticism, the way she made everything feel like it was my fault, it chipped away at me every day. I told her how I started avoiding the house just to avoid the yelling, how I started drinking just to feel a moment of quiet, how I would lie in bed at night feeling like a stranger in my own life. I told her that waking up in the woods, away from it all, was the first time I'd felt peace in years. She nodded, wiping her face, saying she had no idea I had gotten that low. That she knew things were hard, but she never imagined it had pushed me to that point. She told me that since we never filed for divorce, we were still married. And then she asked if I would consider coming home. Not to pick up where we left off, but to start again. To see if something new could grow from all the broken pieces. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I told her I needed time. I didn't know if this change was permanent or just guilt talking. I had spent too long rebuilding myself to risk falling apart again. She nodded. She didn't push. She just said, "Think about it," and walked out the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to silence the storm in my head. A part of me missed her so much it hurt. But another part of me remembered the things I passed through. I didn't come to a decision that night. I just closed my eyes and told myself I'd think more clearly in the morning. Some things in life don't come with quick answers. Looking back on everything, I've realized that love, by itself, just isn't enough. Don't get me wrong, I loved Angelina. I loved her with everything I had. But love without effort, without understanding, without communication and healing, it won't hold. We were two people trying to stay together while dragging heavy emotional baggage behind us. And eventually, that weight broke us. She was grieving, and I didn't know how to help her. I had my own limits, and I ignored them for too long, trying to be strong. That's not strength, that's slow self-destruction. One thing I've learned is that trauma, if left unchecked, can turn into poison. You might not even realize it at first. It creeps into your words, your tone, your actions, and the way you treat the people closest to you. Angelina wasn't a bad person. She was a hurt person, and hurt people sometimes hurt the ones they care about the most. She had every opportunity to face that pain, but she pushed it down and took it out on me. And I let it go on longer than I should have. That's on me, too. I should have set firmer boundaries instead of matching her anger or running from it. Now, to those wondering why I disappeared the way I did, it wasn't to punish her or because I stopped loving her. Sometimes, leaving is the only way to breathe again. Sometimes, disappearing is the only option you have left when staying becomes a slow kind of death. I needed space to remember who I was outside of the chaos. I needed peace, even if it meant being alone. But here's the good part. Healing is possible. It's not fast. It's not simple. It takes a lot of honesty and even more accountability. You can't just wait for time to do the work. You have to face yourself. Angelina eventually did that, and I respect her for it. I've been doing that too, in my own quiet way. We're still figuring things out. There's no magical ending here, just two people trying to heal and maybe find their way back to each other. So if you're going through something similar, take this with you. Love alone doesn't fix what's broken. You've got to show up emotionally, not just physically. If you've been through trauma, don't carry it around pretending it's not there. Talk to someone. Heal. And please, don't assume someone left you out of hate. Sometimes, it's the only way they can survive. If this story hit home for you, or made you think about your own relationships, I hope you like this video, share it, or leave a comment. Your thoughts matter, and I read every single one. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I appreciate you more than you know.